There is a face you've seen 1,000 times. It's on the front of a fashion empire worth billions. It's tattooed on the arms of people who have never read a single line of Greek mythology. It's been carved into stone, painted onto canvases, printed on t-shirts, rendered in video games, and plastered across movie posters for the last 40 years. A woman's face, snakes where their hair should be, eyes that stare straight at you, a mouth caught somewhere between agony and rage. You know this face. You might not know the story, but you know the face. If someone asked you to describe Medusa, you'd probably say a monster from Greek mythology with snakes for hairs who turns people to stone. A villain, a boss fight, a thing that a hero killed and the world celebrated. That's the version everyone carries around. The shorthand, and it's a lie that is 3,000 years old, because Medusa was not born a monster, she was made one. And this isn't a monster story, it's a crime story. 2 crimes committed by 2 gods against 1 woman, and she was punished for both of them. Tonight, I'm going to tell you what actually happened. Not the shorthand, not the movie version, the actual ancient texts, and by the end, you will never look at that face the same way again. But before we continue, the Midnight Archives exist for one reason, and that's to find the stories they buried, the ones too dark to be told during the day, and they buried this one for a reason, and now we're going to dig it up. If that's what you're here for, hit subscribe and like this video, and I'll keep the candle lit. Now, let me introduce you to the woman behind the snakes. Welcome to the Midnight Archives.
Chapter 1. The Woman Before the Snakes. Before the monster, before the stone gaze, before any of it, there was a woman. And to understand what was done to her, you need to meet her first. You need to know who she was when the world was still kind to her, because the world was kind to her, for a while. She was born mortal. That is the first thing you need to understand, and it is the detail that changes everything. Medusa had 2 sisters, Steno and Euryale. The 3 of them were the Gorgons, daughters of Phorcys and Ceto, ancient sea deities who belonged to the oldest generation of Greek mythology. Their family tree reads like a catalogue of nightmares. Their siblings included the Graiae, 3 grey women who shared a single eye and a single tooth between them. Their niece was Echidna, the mother of almost every famous monster in the Greek world. The Chimera, the Sphinx, the Hydra, Cerberus. Medusa was born into a family of horrors, but here is the line that the poet Hesiod buried in his Theogony, written around 700 BC, that separates Medusa from everything around her. Steno and Euryale were immortal. They could not die. They would exist at the edge of the world forever, terrible and eternal, beyond the reach of any blade. Medusa was mortal. She was the only one of the 3 who could bleed, the only one who could age, the only one who had a body that could be broken. Her sisters were eternal horrors. Medusa was flesh, fragile, temporary, human in every way that mattered. And for centuries that was almost all the Greeks said about her. Homer, writing in the 8th century BC, mentioned the Gorgon in both the Iliad and the Odyssey, but only as an image, a face on a shield, a threat in the underworld. He never named her Medusa. He never gave her a story. In the Iliad, the Gorgon's head appears on Athena's divine shield, among other terrors. Fear, dread, and the Gorgon, glaring with terrible eyes. In the Odyssey, the head is a threat that keeps Odysseus from lingering too long among the dead. Even in the land of ghosts, the Gorgon is the thing that frightens. But Homer never explains what the Gorgon is, never tells you who she was or how she ended up on a shield. The face was a given, a primal image. You didn't need the biography. The skull on a gate doesn't come with a name. It communicates on its own. Do not approach. Be afraid. The Greeks put that face everywhere. Archaeologists have found the Gorgonean, the Gorgon's face rendered as a symbol, on pottery from the 7th century BC onward. Wine cups, temple pediments, door frames, shields, coins, Amulets hung around children's necks to ward off the evil eye. The face was an apotropion, from the Greek word meaning to turn away, a ward, a guardian, a thing you put on a surface to scare away whatever might come. But here is the thing about a face that is used to scare people. Nobody asks where the face came from. Nobody wonders who she was before she became a weapon. The function erases the person. The moment the face becomes a tool, for protection, for intimidation, for decoration, the individual behind it disappears. All that remains is the effect. For 700 years, that was all Medusa was. An effect without a cause, a face without a story. Nobody asked how she felt. Nobody wondered what she looked like before the snakes. And then Ovid told the world what happened to her. And the silence made sense, because the story was the kind that civilizations prefer to leave untold. And she was beautiful. Not beautiful the way a goddess is beautiful. Cold, untouchable, carved from divinity. Medusa's beauty was mortal beauty. The kind that exists in skin and movement, and the way light catches a face at a certain hour. The kind that ages, the kind that bruises, the kind that other people notice, comment on, reach for. And reach for it they did. The Roman poet Ovid, writing in the 1st century AD, and we will come back to Ovid, because he is the one who finally told the truth, tells us that suitors came from everywhere. Men travelled to see her, men competed for her attention. Her beauty was not a private quality. It was a public event, the kind that becomes a reputation before you've had a chance to decide whether you wanted one, the kind that means you are discussed in rooms you've never entered, desired by people you've never met, reduced to a single quality before anyone has bothered to learn a second one. Think about what that does to a person. To be known, everywhere, for one thing. To walk into a room and know that the room has already decided what you are. To have your identity fixed by other people's perception before you've said a word. Medusa's beauty was not a gift. It was a visibility she never asked for, a spotlight she could not turn off. Of all her features, Ovid says, the most celebrated was her hair. Not her eyes, not her face, her hair, the thing that frames you, the thing that moves when you move, the thing that people remember, the colour, the length, the way it caught the light when she turned her head. Her hair was her glory. That is the word Ovid uses. Her glory, the thing that defined her in the eyes of the world. Remember the hair. It matters, because it's the first thing they're going to take from her. Later sources, not Ovid himself, but Roman and medieval retellings that drew on his account, place Medusa as a priestess of Athena, a woman who had dedicated herself to the virgin goddess, a woman who served in Athena's temple, who maintained the sacred space, who lived her life within the bounds of the goddess's law. If this is true, and enough sources repeat it that it has become inseparable from the myth, then Medusa was not just beautiful. She was devout. She had chosen a life of service. She had placed herself under the protection of the most powerful female deity in the Greek world, Athena, the goddess of wisdom, of warfare, of civilization itself, the goddess whose name is carved into the pediments of courthouses across the Western world. Medusa had given herself to Athena. She lived inside the temple walls. She followed the rules. She did everything right. Think about what that means. She was pious. She was obedient. She was exactly where she was supposed to be, doing exactly what she was supposed to do. She had placed herself inside the safest structure her world could offer, a goddess's temple, and trusted that the walls would hold. They didn't hold. Poseidon came to the temple, the god of the sea, the earth shaker, one of the three brothers who divided the universe between them. Zeus took the sky, Hades took the dead, and Poseidon took the ocean. He was Athena's uncle. He was one of the most powerful beings in existence, and he came to Athena's temple where a mortal woman was serving. Whether he came specifically for Medusa, or whether her beauty drew him when he arrived, the sources don't say. What they say is what happened next. Ovid's Latin is vitiasse, to violate, to defile, to ruin. There is no ambiguity in the word. There is no soft meadow, no spring flowers, no gentle euphemism about lying together. Hesiod, writing 700 years earlier, had used the delicate phrase "lay with her in a soft meadow among spring flowers." Ovid stripped that away. He used the word that meant what it meant. Poseidon raped Medusa in the temple of Athena, inside the most sacred space belonging to another god, a sanctuary, a place of absolute purity, protected by divine law. He didn't just attack Medusa, he desecrated Athena's house. He committed the assault inside the one place in the world that was supposed to be inviolable. And by doing it there, inside the temple, on sacred ground, in the one space that should have been untouchable, he made the violation into a double wound. He hurt Medusa, and he humiliated Athena. He proved that her sanctuary was not actually safe, that her authority, for all its grandeur, could not stop his desire, that the most powerful female deity in the Greek pantheon could not protect one woman in one room from one man who decided he wanted what was there. This is the context that makes Athena's response something more complicated than simple cruelty. Athena was humiliated, her authority was challenged, her temple, the physical embodiment of her power, was defiled, and she could not retaliate against Poseidon. He was her equal, he was her uncle, he was the sea. You cannot punish the sea for what it does, you can only punish the shore. Medusa was the shore, and Athena's response was not to punish Poseidon, she punished Medusa. Ovid writes that Athena turned away. She lifted her aegis, her shield, to cover her own eyes, so that she would not have to see what was happening in her own temple. The goddess of wisdom chose not to look. The goddess who could see into the hearts of men, who guided heroes through labyrinths and across battlefields, who was celebrated above all things for her clarity of vision. She deliberately blinded herself to what was happening in her own house, and then she punished the victim for what she chose not to watch. She took Medusa's hair. The beautiful hair, the famous hair, the hair that men had praised and desired, the glory that Ovid named as the thing that defined her. And she turned it into snakes, not just any snakes, living snakes, snakes that hissed and writhed and bit, snakes that grew from her scalp where the beautiful hair had been. The thing that had made people stop and stare was now the thing that made people recoil. The thing that had drawn men to her was now the thing that warned them away. Every strand of beauty replaced by something venomous. And Athena didn't stop at the hair. She transformed Medusa's face into a weapon. Anyone who looked directly at her would be turned to stone, not blinded, not hurt, turned to stone, frozen, stopped, converted from a living, breathing, feeling person into an object, into a thing. Think about what that curse actually does. It takes a woman who is already being treated as an object, a body to be desired, a face to be praised, a prize to be claimed, and makes the objectification literal. Now, anyone who engages with her existence is objectified themselves, turned into a thing, turned into stone. The curse doesn't just punish Medusa, it makes her radioactive. It ensures that no one can be near her, know her, love her, or help her without being destroyed by the attempt. Read that again. The goddess did not punish the rapist. She could not punish the rapist, because the rapist was her uncle, her equal, one of the three brothers who held the universe between them. Poseidon held the sea. You do not punish the sea. You do not bring the ocean to trial. You do not hold the tide accountable for what it destroys. So Athena punished the body that was available. She took the thing that had attracted the gods' attention, the beauty, the hair, the desirability, and destroyed it. She made Medusa repulsive. She made Medusa dangerous. She made it so that no man would ever look at Medusa again without being destroyed by the act of looking. The beauty that attracted the assault was converted into a punishment that the victim would carry forever. She was made into a warning, a lesson, an object that demonstrated what happens to beauty when it exists in a world where gods take what they want. Medusa did not choose the beauty. She did not choose the assault. She did not choose the temple. And she did not choose the snakes. Every single element of her story was imposed on her by forces more powerful than herself. First the beauty that nature gave her, then the violence that Poseidon inflicted on her, then the punishment that Athena delivered. At no point does Medusa make a decision. At no point does she act. She is acted upon continuously by everyone, from the moment we meet her until the moment she dies. 2,000 years later, every courtroom in the Western world has heard a version of this story. A woman assaulted, a powerful man untouched, and the question that follows the victim everywhere she goes: what were you wearing? What did you look like? What did you do to attract it? Athena asked the same question, and her answer was snakes. She was also pregnant. The children of Poseidon were inside her. Pegasus and Chrysaor, conceived in violence inside a sacred space, growing inside a body that had been cursed. They could not be born naturally. They were sealed inside the monster that Athena had made. They would only emerge when the body was broken open, when the head was cut. She was carrying her rapist's children in a body that her rapist's niece had turned into a prison, and she would carry them until the day a man came to cut her open. That man was already on his way. Chapter 2: The Monster They Made. After the transformation, Medusa disappears from her own story. Nobody writes about what her life looked like. Nobody describes her exile. Nobody records a single word she said. But if you read between the lines of what the ancient sources do tell us, you can piece together what her existence became, and it is the loneliest thing in Greek mythology. She was sent to the edge of the world, beyond the river ocean, beyond the boundary where the known world dissolved into myth, to a place that the Greeks described as the western margin of existence, where the sun set, where night began, where the living world thinned into something else. She lived there with Steno and Euryale, her immortal sisters, the only beings in the universe who could look at her face and survive. Around her dwelling, the landscape was littered with stone figures, the petrified bodies of every man, every animal, every living thing that had wandered into her territory and met her gaze. They stood where they had fallen, frozen mid-step, mid-reach, mid-scream, a garden of statues, a graveyard of gazes, the evidence of her curse, renewed every time some adventurer or lost creature stumbled too close. She was surrounded by the consequences of her own existence. She could not move through the world without leaving a trail of death behind her, and the death was not something she chose. It was something she was. Athena had designed a punishment of extraordinary precision. It didn't just hurt Medusa. It made Medusa's existence itself the instrument of suffering. She was the weapon and the wound at the same time. Consider what her days looked like. She could not look at another person without killing them. She could not be looked at without killing the person who saw her. Every encounter was lethal. Every gaze was fatal. She had been placed in a prison of total isolation. Not by chains, not by walls, but by her own body. The only company she could keep was her sisters, who were immortal, who could not be turned to stone, who would sit with her at the edge of the world forever. Imagine the routine of it, waking up, looking out at the stone figures scattered around your home, each one a person who walked too close, looked too directly, and paid for it. Some of them might have been sailors, blown off course. Some might have been soldiers, sent by kings to claim her head. Some might have been nobody, lost travelers who stumbled onto the wrong shore and met the wrong eyes. She didn't choose any of them. She didn't want any of them. They came, they looked, they stopped, and she added another statue to a garden she never planted. The cruelty of Athena's punishment is not the snakes. It is not even the stone gaze. It is the loneliness, the total, permanent, irrevocable loneliness of a woman who cannot be near anyone without destroying them. She has been made into a thing that kills closeness itself, connection itself, the basic human act of looking at another person and being looked at in return, the act that makes us feel seen, known, real, has been turned into a death sentence. Athena didn't just take Medusa's beauty, she took her ability to exist in the presence of another living being. There is no scene in Greek mythology where Medusa speaks, not one line of dialogue, not a cry, not a whisper, not a single recorded word from any ancient source. Every other major figure in Greek myth gets a voice. Achilles rages, Odysseus lies, Penelope weeps and reasons. Even the Cyclops screams. Medusa says nothing. She has been given a face that kills and a voice that the poets never bothered to record. She exists in the myth the way she exists on the shield, as an image, a surface, a thing to be looked at but never heard, and inside her the children grew. Pegasus and Chrysaor, the offspring of Poseidon, sealed inside a body that could never deliver them naturally. The only way for them to enter the world was through the destruction of the body that contained them. Her death was their birth. Her destruction was their creation. She was not a mother. She was a container, a vessel, sealed shut, waiting to be opened by whoever brought a blade sharp enough. Ovid wrote this in exile. He had been banished from Rome by the Emperor Augustus around the same time the Metamorphoses was completed, officially for a poem called the Ars Amatoria, which Augustus found obscene, but unofficially for something Ovid witnessed, something he refers to only as an error that he would never name. He spent the last decade of his life on the shores of the Black Sea, in a frontier town at the edge of the Roman world, writing letters begging to come home. He died there. He never came back. A man in exile wrote the definitive version of a woman in exile. A man punished by a ruler he couldn't challenge wrote the story of a woman punished by a goddess she couldn't challenge. A man erased from the center of civilization and pushed to its margin told the story of a woman who was erased from the world entirely and pushed to its furthest edge. The parallels are not accidental. Ovid understood punishment. He understood what it felt like to have everything taken by someone who couldn't be questioned, and he put that understanding into a myth about a woman who had been on the page for 700 years without anyone asking what had happened to her. That blade was on its way, and the man carrying it was not a hero. He was an errand boy, sent on a suicide mission by a king who wanted him dead. Perseus was a demigod. His mother was Danae, a mortal princess locked in a bronze tower by her own father, who had been told by an oracle that his grandson would kill him. Zeus found a way in anyway, entering the locked chamber as a shower of golden light. Danae did not invite him. The pattern starts before the story does. Perseus grew up on a small island with his mother. The king of the island, Polydectes, wanted Danae. She didn't want him. Perseus was in the way, so Polydectes devised a plan. He held a banquet. He demanded gifts of horses. Perseus, who had no horses, offered the king anything else he wanted. Polydectes told him what he wanted, the head of Medusa. It was a death sentence disguised as a quest. Nobody had ever killed a Gorgon and returned. Polydectes expected Perseus to die in the attempt, leaving Danae unprotected. The quest was not heroic. It was a political maneuver designed to remove an obstacle to a forced marriage, a man sent to die so that another man could take his mother. But Perseus was the son of Zeus, and the gods protect their own. Athena came to him first, the same Athena who had punished Medusa for being raped in her temple. The goddess who had turned a woman into a monster now armed a man to go and cut that monster's head off. She gave Perseus a polished bronze shield, so reflective it could be used as a mirror. She told him the trick. Do not look at Medusa directly. Look at her reflection. The reflected gaze does not kill. Hermes came next, the messenger god. He gave Perseus winged sandals that allowed him to fly, and a curved sword made of adamantine, a mythical metal so hard it could cut through anything, even the neck of a Gorgon. Hades contributed too. The god of the dead lent Perseus the cap of invisibility, a helm that made the wearer impossible to see. The lord of the underworld providing a tool of stealth so that a man could sneak up on a sleeping woman and cut off her head without being detected. And the nymphs gave Perseus a kibesis, a magical bag, the only container that could safely hold the severed head without its power leaking out and turning everyone nearby to stone. Count the gifts: a mirror shield from Athena, winged sandals from Hermes, an unbreakable sword from Hermes, a helmet of invisibility from Hades, a magic bag from the nymphs. 5 divine advantages given to one man for the purpose of killing one woman. The entire machinery of Olympus mobilized for the decapitation of a victim they themselves had created. Perseus didn't earn any of it. He didn't train for years. He didn't undergo trials. He didn't sacrifice anything. He was handed the tools because he was the son of a god, and the gods take care of their own bloodlines the way aristocrats take care of their own families, with gifts, connections, and access that nobody else has. The idea that Perseus's advantages undermined his heroism would have been incomprehensible to an ancient Greek audience. The advantages were the heroism. Being chosen by the gods was the achievement. 3,000 years later, we still tell stories like this, stories where the person with every advantage destroys the person with none and calls it a triumph. But before Perseus could find Medusa, he had to find the Graeae, the three grey sisters who shared a single eye. They were Medusa's relatives. They knew where the Gorgons lived, and they would never willingly tell a stranger. So Perseus stole their eye. He waited until one sister was passing it to another, the moment when all three were blind, when the shared organ of sight was in transit between hands, and he snatched it. 3 old women, blind, groping in the darkness, begging for the return of the only eye between them. Perseus held it hostage. He told them he would keep it unless they revealed the location of the Gorgons. 3 disabled women, ancient, vulnerable, sharing a single organ of perception, coerced into betraying their own family by a young man who exploited their helplessness at the exact moment they were most exposed. He didn't persuade them. He didn't bargain with them. He took the one thing they had and held it hostage until they gave him what he wanted, and the story calls him clever for it. Every woman in this myth is used by Perseus on his way to Medusa. The Graeae are robbed, Medusa is killed, Andromeda is collected. His mother, Danae, is the reason for the quest in the first place. The entire narrative is powered by what he does to women and what women are forced to provide for him, and the myth calls it a hero's journey. They told him. In some versions, he threw the eye into a lake. 3 ancient women already sharing a single eye, now left with nothing, blind, alone, robbed by the hero of the story on his way to rob their sister of her life. An invisible man carrying an unbreakable sword was now flying toward the edge of the world, and the woman waiting there had no idea he was coming. Chapter 3. The Kill. This is the part of the story that every movie poster shows. The hero raises the sword. The monster's head comes off. Triumph, glory, the crowd cheers. But the actual scene as the ancient sources describe it, the conditions, the method, the state she was in when the blade came down, is not a battle. It's not a contest. It's an execution, performed on a sleeping woman, by an invisible man, armed by gods. Perseus flew to the edge of the world, to the place beyond ocean where the Gorgons lived, and he found them. All 3 were asleep. Medusa was asleep. The mortal Gorgon, the only one who could be killed, was lying with her eyes closed, surrounded by her immortal sisters. Around her, the landscape was studded with the stone figures of men and animals who had looked at her face, a sculpture garden that she had never chosen to build, the accumulated evidence of every life her curse had taken. Perseus put on the cap of invisibility. He could not be seen. He raised the bronze shield and angled it so that he could see Medusa's reflection without meeting her gaze. He could not be turned to stone. He drew the adamantine sword. He could not be stopped. The mirror is the detail that everyone remembers about this story, the clever trick, the ingenious workaround. But think about what the mirror actually means in the context of this myth. Medusa's power is in her gaze. Her eyes are the weapon. Looking at her is what kills. And the mirror allows Perseus to look at her without being affected. He can see her, but the seeing doesn't touch him. He can observe her, study her, position himself for the kill, all without any of the consequences that every other person who has ever looked at her has faced. The mirror is a technology of detachment. It allows the killer to engage with the victim without being affected by her, to see her without feeling the impact of seeing her, to study her face. The face that was beautiful once, the face that was transformed against her will, the face that has been causing suffering since the day a goddess decided it should, and feel nothing. The mirror turns Medusa into an image, a reflection, a thing to be managed rather than a person to be reckoned with. It is the same tool that every institution has ever used to deal with the people it has harmed. Look at them indirectly, study them through reports and statistics and second-hand accounts. Never look directly, because looking directly might turn you to stone. Which is to say, looking directly might make you feel something, and feeling something might stop you from doing what you came to do. Strip away the mythology for a moment. Strip away the hero's quest and the divine mission and the language of glory. What you have is this: a man who cannot be seen, carrying a weapon that cannot be stopped, standing over a woman who does not know he is there. She is asleep. She is defenseless. She is in the one place that should be safe. Her own home, surrounded by her own sisters, at the farthest edge of the world from the civilization that destroyed her. There is no distance far enough, no exile remote enough, no sleep deep enough to protect a woman whose body has been claimed by people more powerful than she is. He cut off her head. The adamantine blade went through her neck in a single stroke. The head came away from the body, and from the severed neck, from the wound, not the womb, from the opening that the blade had made, two beings erupted into the world. Pegasus, the winged horse, the creature that would become a symbol of poetry and inspiration for the next 3,000 years, the image on 100 corporate logos, the figure on 1,000 nursery walls, born not from a mother's body, but from a mother's wound. Chrysaor, the giant with the golden sword, father of Geryon, the three-bodied monster that Heracles would later kill, born at the same moment, from the same wound, covered in the same blood. The children of Poseidon, conceived in violence, delivered by violence, they sprang from her neck fully formed, not crying, not small, not vulnerable, but already powerful, already divine, already part of the world that had destroyed the woman who carried them. Her body was the doorway, her death was the key. The only way for these children to exist in the world was for their mother to stop existing in it. Think about what Pegasus means in the context of what just happened. The winged horse, the symbol of poetry, the image of creative flight and transcendence that has decorated 1,000 book covers and 100 corporate logos. Pegasus is associated with beauty, with inspiration, with the muses. He is the creature that struck his hoof on Mount Helicon and created the Hippocrene, the fountain of the muses, the source of artistic inspiration. Inspiration, born from a severed neck, beauty born from butchery. The most elevated symbol in Western culture, the winged horse of poetry, created by the most brutal act in the myth. The culture needed the horse, the culture needed the inspiration, and the price of that inspiration was a woman's head. Nobody talks about that. Nobody mentions when they stamp Pegasus on a book spine or paint him on a nursery wall that he was born from the murder of his mother. The birth has been separated from the death. The product has been separated from the cost. The way it always is. Steno and Euryale woke up. They saw their sister's headless body. They screamed. The sound, two immortal beings screaming into the dark at the edge of the world, is one of the few moments in Greek mythology where the grief of monsters is acknowledged at all. These are not sympathetic figures in the Greek imagination. They are gorgons. They are horrors. The poets who wrote about them expected no one to feel anything for them. But the scream is in the text. The grief is in the text. Two sisters, waking to find the third one, the mortal one, the vulnerable one, the one they must have known, on some level, they would lose, lying headless on the ground, her children already gone, her blood soaking into the stone, and the killer is nowhere. The killer is invisible, flying away on borrowed wings, carrying their sister's face in a bag. They searched for him. They could not find him. They could not catch him. They could not avenge their sister. Two immortal beings, left to grieve forever at the edge of the world, beside a headless body that would never be buried, in a place that no one would ever visit except to take something from it. The blood that dripped from the severed head as Perseus flew across the Libyan desert became venomous snakes where it hit the sand. Every drop that fell from her wound produced something that bites. Even in death, Medusa's body was generating the thing that defined her curse. Even her blood could not touch the earth without creating poison. The land she passed over was changed by her death. The desert crawling with serpents born from the blood of a woman who never asked for any of it. No one in the myth pauses for this moment. No source lingers on the sister's grief. The story follows Perseus, flying home with his trophy, moving forward into his future. Steno and Euryale stay behind, in the dark, at the margin of the world, holding what's left of the only mortal member of their family. They will be there forever. They are immortal. Their grief has no expiration date. The story moves on. It always moves on. The person with the sword gets to move on. The people left behind don't get a chapter. Perseus flew home with a severed head in a bag, and what he did with it, what everyone did with it for the next 3,000 years, turns this from a story about one woman into a story about what the world does to women's bodies after it's finished with them. Chapter 4. The Head That Never Stopped Working. Perseus killed Medusa, took her head, flew home, but the story doesn't end with the kill. It starts again, because the head, the severed head of a woman who was raped, cursed, exiled, and murdered in her sleep, goes on to become the most powerful weapon in the Greek world, and then a trophy, and then a symbol, and then a logo. And at every stage, someone finds a new use for it, and at every stage, the woman behind it is silent. The first thing Perseus does with the head is use it to kill. On his way home, flying over the coast of Ethiopia, he looks down and sees a young woman chained to a rock by the sea. Her name is Andromeda. She is a princess, chained there as a sacrifice to a sea monster because her mother, Cassiopeia, boasted that she was more beautiful than the sea nymphs. Poseidon, the same Poseidon, always the same Poseidon, sent the monster in retaliation, a woman chained to a rock because another woman was too beautiful. The pattern is already repeating before Medusa's blood has dried. Look at the structure. Cassiopeia boasted about beauty, Poseidon was offended, a sea monster was sent, and the solution, the cost of resolving the crisis, was a young woman's body chained to a rock, offered to the ocean. Not Cassiopeia's body, not the body of the person who caused the offense, the body of her daughter, the innocent, the one who had said nothing, done nothing, boasted about nothing. Her body was the payment because her body was available, and in this world, the available body is always a woman's. Perseus kills the sea monster. In some versions he uses the sword. In others, he pulls the head from the bag and turns the creature to stone mid-attack. He rescues Andromeda. He claims her as his bride. Her father agrees to the match because Perseus has leverage and a weapon that turns living things into furniture. The rescue is also a transaction. The woman is the currency. The head is the collateral. Nobody asks Andromeda what she wants. She has been chained to a rock, nearly fed to a monster, and now handed to a stranger carrying a severed head in a bag. She has been an object throughout, first a sacrifice, then a prize. The only thing that changed was who owned her. He arrives home. Polydectes, the king who sent him on the quest, who expected him to die, who has been trying to force Danae into marriage in Perseus's absence, is hosting a banquet. Perseus walks in. Polydectes laughs. He doesn't believe Perseus completed the quest. Perseus reaches into the bag. He holds up the head. Every person in the room who looks at it turns to stone. Polydectes, his courtiers, his allies, his servants, an entire court, frozen mid-laugh, mid-drink, mid-sentence, turned from living people into furniture in the space of a single heartbeat. The head doesn't discriminate. Everyone who looks dies, guilty and innocent, the king who deserved it and the servants who are just pouring wine. The weapon has no precision, it has only power, and the person wielding it decides who gets exposed to it. This is the head's true nature, not as a trophy, as a weapon of mass destruction. It kills everyone in its radius. It cannot be aimed. It cannot be calibrated. It cannot distinguish between the person you wanted to punish and the person who happened to be standing in the same room. And Perseus uses it the way every person who has ever held a weapon of indiscriminate power uses it. He tells himself the target deserved it, and he doesn't think about the others. But the head's power goes beyond the kill. It is also a tool of leverage. Perseus has already discovered what every powerful person discovers about weapons like this. You don't have to use them every time. You just have to have them. The head in the bag is a threat that restructures every interaction, every negotiation, every room Perseus walks into. People know what he's carrying. They know what it can do, and their behavior changes. They comply. They cooperate. They give him what he wants. Medusa's face, even after death, is still doing what Athena designed it to do, making people behave out of fear. And then Perseus gives the head away. He gives it to Athena. Stop and let that land. The goddess who punished Medusa for being raped in her temple now receives Medusa's severed head as a gift. The goddess who covered her own eyes so she wouldn't have to watch what Poseidon did. That goddess now takes the face of the woman she refused to protect and mounts it on her aegis, her shield, the divine object that represents her authority, her power, her identity as the goddess of war and wisdom. Medusa's face is now the centerpiece of Athena's armor. She wears it into battle. She wears it on her chest. She wears it for eternity. The face of a woman who came to her temple seeking protection, who served her faithfully, who was violated inside her own walls. That face is now Athena's most iconic symbol of power. The victim's face has become the perpetrator's accessory. And if that sentence sounds like it could describe something that happened last year, rather than 3,000 years ago, that is not a coincidence. That is the myth working exactly as it was designed to work. This is called the Gorgonean. The face of the Gorgon, rendered as a symbol, and from this moment it leaves mythology and enters the real world, and it never leaves. Greek soldiers painted the Gorgonean on their shields, the face that turns enemies to stone, the ultimate threat display. Temples carved it above their doorways, a ward against evil, a sign that this space was protected by the same power that destroyed Medusa. Coins bore it, pottery displayed it, amulets were carved in its shape and hung around the necks of children as protection against the evil eye. The image that protected children was the face of a woman who had been punished for what a god did to her. The symbol of safety was a trophy of violence, and nobody saw the contradiction, because nobody remembered the story. They just saw the face and felt the fear, and fear, it seemed, was enough. The Romans adopted the Gorgonean wholesale. It appeared on Roman armor, Roman temples, Roman mosaics. When Christianity replaced the old religion, the face persisted, carved into medieval church walls as a symbol of evil conquered, repurposing a pagan victim as a Christian demon without changing a single feature of the face. The Renaissance picked it up and turned it into high art. Benvenuto Cellini completed his bronze Perseus in 1554. It stands in the Loggia dei Lanzi in Florence to this day. Perseus holds Medusa's severed head aloft, his foot on her headless body. Blood pours from her neck, the snakes writhe, and the statue was commissioned by Cosimo de' Medici, the Duke of Florence, as a political statement. Cosimo had recently consolidated power over Florence after a period of political chaos. He needed to send a message, not just to his citizens, to the other rulers of Italy, and the message he chose was a man standing on a woman's body, holding her head, declaring victory. The myth of Perseus and Medusa was deployed as political propaganda, a demonstration that the Duke's enemies would be dealt with the way Medusa was dealt with, swiftly, totally, with the head displayed afterward as proof. The statue was placed in a public square where ordinary Florentines would see it every day on their way to work. A woman's headless body, trampled underfoot by a man, normalized into the daily landscape of a city. You passed it on the way to buy bread. Children played near it. It became background, furniture, the way violence always becomes furniture when the powerful repeat it long enough. Caravaggio painted it. Twice. He rendered Medusa's head on a convex wooden shield, an actual functional shield, as a gift for a Medici patron. The face is frozen in the instant after decapitation. The mouth is open. The eyes are wide. The snakes are still alive, still writhing, still reacting to the trauma of the body they are attached to. Blood pours from the severed neck. And the genius of Caravaggio, the thing that made him the most radical painter of his age, is that he painted the moment from Medusa's perspective. You are looking at her face the way Perseus would have seen it reflected in his shield. You are the killer, and the expression on her face is not rage, it is not monstrousness, it is shock, the expression of a person who has just realized in the final half second of consciousness what is happening to her. For 400 years, people have looked at that painting and called it brilliant. They have analyzed the brushwork. They have written doctoral theses about the use of light and shadow, and almost none of them have said the obvious thing. This is a painting of a woman's murder, rendered on the weapon used to commit it, given as a gift to a powerful man. It is a snuff painting on a shield, and it hangs in the Uffizi Gallery in Florence, where tourists line up to admire it, and audio guides describe the technique, and nobody mentions that the woman on the shield never consented to any of this. Not the assault, not the transformation, not the decapitation, not the painting, not the 400 years of admiration that followed. The head moved through history like a currency. Each century found a new use for it. The Greeks put it on armor, the Romans put it on architecture, the church carved it into cathedrals, the Renaissance turned it into political art, the Romantics turned it into poetry. Shelley wrote about it, finding sublimity in the severed head of a woman. At every stage, someone found a way to use her face. At every stage, the use was different, and at every stage, the woman behind the face was irrelevant. What mattered was the effect. What mattered was what the face could do for the person displaying it. And then, in the 20th century, the face found its final form, not on a shield, not on a temple, not on a painting, on a handbag. Chapter 5. The Face That Wouldn't Die. 3,000 years, shield to temple to painting to handbag, and the face never stopped working. It just kept finding new owners, new surfaces, new ways to make money or make a point or sell something to someone. But something has started to shift, because the people looking at the face now are not the people who used to hold the shield. In 1978, a man from Reggio Calabria named Gianni Versace founded a fashion house and chose Medusa's face as its logo. When asked why, he said it was because Medusa represented the power to make people fall in love with you and have no way of going back. That's what he said. The woman who was raped because of her beauty, punished for her beauty, and killed while she slept. Her face was chosen to sell luxury goods because a designer liked the idea of beauty so powerful that no one could resist it. Versace wasn't making a statement about the myth. He was making a statement about his brand. He wanted a symbol that communicated irresistible attraction. He wanted a face that stopped people in their tracks. And the face he chose was the face of a woman whose entire existence had been defined by what other people did to her because they found her irresistible. Today, Medusa's face stares out from Versace handbags, belts, sunglasses, and the iron gates of the Versace mansion in Miami Beach. It is printed on shirts that cost more than some people's monthly rent. It is one of the most recognizable luxury logos in the world. The symbol of supreme violence has become the symbol of supreme commerce, and the woman is still silent, and the woman is still useful, and the woman is still not the one profiting from her own face. Versace was not the last. Alexander McQueen put Gorgon imagery into multiple collections. Tattoo artists across the world will tell you that Medusa is one of their most requested designs. Walk into any studio in any city and ask for her, and the artist won't need a reference image. She is inked onto the skin of people who have never read Ovid, never heard of Hesiod, never once wondered how a woman ended up with snakes in her hair. They want the image because the image communicates something. Power, danger, don't touch me. The face that punishes anyone who looks at it has become the universal symbol for a person who refuses to be vulnerable. But look at who's wearing it. A man with Medusa tattooed on his forearm is using the face of a woman who is violated and silenced as his personal armor. He is wearing her suffering as his aesthetic. The very thing that was done to her, the conversion of a person into a symbol, the erasure of the individual behind the image, is being done again by the people who ink her face onto their bodies. They think they are honoring her. They are using her, the way everyone has always used her. Cinema did the same thing. Every film adaptation, from the 1981 Clash of the Titans to the 2010 remake to the Percy Jackson franchise, tells the story from Perseus's perspective. Medusa is the boss fight, the level you have to beat, the obstacle between the hero and his reward. In the 2010 film, she slithers through a darkened temple, shot like a horror villain, hunted by the camera the way she was hunted by the man with the sword. She has no lines that matter. She has no interiority. She exists to be defeated so that the hero can continue his journey. Video games did it too. God of War, Assassin's Creed, Immortals Phoenix Rising. In every version, Medusa is an enemy, a thing with a health bar, a creature you fight and kill and move past on your way to the next checkpoint. Her stone gaze is a gameplay mechanic, something you dodge, something you counter, something that makes the fight more interesting. She has been converted from a woman into a feature, from a person into content. And the reason all of these industries keep reaching for her, fashion, film, gaming, tattoo culture, graphic design, is the same reason the Greeks put her on their shields. She works. The face communicates instantly. You don't need context. You don't need the backstory, the snakes, the gaze, the open mouth. The image bypasses narrative and hits something older, something pre-verbal, something in the brain that recognizes a threat before the conscious mind has time to process it. She is the most efficient symbol of female danger that Western culture has ever produced, and that efficiency is the problem, because efficiency requires the removal of everything that slows the image down, everything complicated, everything human, everything that would make you pause and ask, wait, how did she get this way? The story slows the image down. The story makes the image uncomfortable. The story turns the monster back into a woman. And a woman is harder to put on a shield than a monster is. So for 3,000 years, they kept the face and left out the story. And then people started putting the story back. In 1975, the French feminist philosopher Hélène Cixous published an essay called The Laugh of the Medusa. She argued that the myth was the founding metaphor of patriarchal culture, the story that taught men to fear women's power and taught women to fear their own faces. The Gorgon's gaze that turns men to stone, Cixous argued, is not a curse. It is the natural consequence of a woman who looks directly at the world and refuses to look away. You only have to look at the Medusa straight on to see her, Cixous wrote, and she's not deadly, she's beautiful, and she's laughing. Cixous was refusing the premise. The entire myth is built on the assumption that Medusa's gaze is destructive, that looking at her is fatal, that her face is a weapon. Cixous said, what if the fear is the point? What if the story exists not because her gaze actually kills, but because the people in power needed everyone to believe it did? What if the myth was built to prevent anyone from looking directly at what was done to her? Because that's what the myth does. It makes you look away. It trains you from the first time you hear the story to believe that looking at Medusa is dangerous. And if you never look at her directly, you never see the woman. You only see the monster. And if you only see the monster, you never ask who made her one. The myth is a mirror, not Perseus's mirror, the kind that lets you kill without consequence, a different kind, the kind that shows a culture what it believes about women who are too visible, too desired, too damaged, the kind that shows you that the first instinct when a woman has been harmed by someone powerful is not to confront the powerful, but to change the woman, to make her monstrous, to make her the problem, to put put her face on a shield and call it protection, when what you really mean is we handled it. We dealt with her. The situation has been resolved. In 2008, a sculptor named Luciano Garbati created a statue that inverted the myth entirely. Medusa, standing upright, holding a sword in one hand and the severed head of Perseus in the other, the victim holding the head of the man who was sent to kill her. In 2020, a version of the statue was installed across the street from the Manhattan Criminal Court, the courthouse where Harvey Weinstein was convicted. Medusa standing outside the building, where for the first time in a very long time, a powerful man had been held accountable. And in the years since, Medusa's face has appeared on protest signs, on social media posts, on the bodies of women who have experienced what she experienced, not because she's powerful, not because she's terrifying, because she's familiar, because the story of a woman who was violated, blamed, transformed into something monstrous, silenced, killed, and then had her image used by everyone else for their own purposes. That is not a myth. That is a pattern so old and so persistent that the Greeks carved it into stone 3,000 years ago without realizing they were writing a prophecy. The pattern works like this. A woman is harmed. The harm is acknowledged, but the blame is redirected. She was in the wrong place. She was wearing the wrong thing. She was too beautiful, too visible, too present. The woman is transformed, not with snakes, but socially. She becomes difficult. She becomes damaged. She becomes dangerous. She becomes the thing that makes people uncomfortable at dinner parties, the thing that friends describe with a lowered voice and a careful choice of words. She is turned into a gorgon, not by magic, by the slow grinding process of a world that would rather change the woman than confront the man. And then, if she is loud enough, if she is visible enough, if she refuses to stay at the edge of the world, someone is sent to silence her, not with a sword, with a settlement, with a non-disclosure agreement, with a whisper campaign, with the quiet withdrawal of invitations and opportunities and the slow consensus among the powerful that she is too much, too angry, too dangerous to have in the room. And after she is silenced, her story is told by everyone except her. It is told at conferences and in documentaries and in think pieces, and the people telling it always frame it as a story about power or justice or change, and her face is put on the cover and her name is in the headline, and she is once again a face on a shield, useful, decorative, silent. 3,000 years, the names change, the mechanism doesn't. Here is the last thing I want you to carry out of this video. Medusa's gaze turns people to stone. That is the single most famous fact about her. For 3,000 years, it has been understood as a weapon, as a curse, as the thing that makes her a monster. But think about it differently. Think about a woman who has been violated, a woman who has been punished for her own violation, a woman who has been exiled to the edge of the world, carrying the children of her rapist, wearing a face that no one can look at without being destroyed. What if the stone gaze is not a weapon? What if it's a scream? What if turning people to stone is the only language left to a woman whose voice was taken, whose story was told by everyone except her, whose pain was so immense that the only way it could express itself was by stopping people in their tracks, by freezing them, by making them unable to move, by forcing them to stand there, still and silent, the way she has been standing, still and silent, for 3,000 years. She doesn't turn people to stone because she's a monster. She turns people to stone because no one would stand still long enough to look at what was done to her. The ancient Greeks put her face on shields and called it protection. Cellini put her head under Perseus's foot and called it art. Versace put her face on a handbag and called it luxury. Survivors put her face on a protest sign and called it recognition. For 3,000 years, everyone has used Medusa. And for 3,000 years, everyone has decided what her face means without asking her. Maybe that's the final transformation. Not snakes, not stone. The transformation of a woman into a symbol that everyone interprets and nobody listens to. The transformation of a person into a meaning that belongs to whoever is holding the shield. But here's what I think Ovid understood. Sitting in exile on the Black Sea, writing the story that everyone before him had refused to tell. The face on the shield still has a woman behind it. The myth still has a person inside it. And the fact that 3,000 years of poets, painters, sculptors, filmmakers, game designers, fashion houses, and tattoo artists have all used her face without telling her story doesn't mean the story isn't there. It means no one wanted to hear it. Now you've heard it.
There's one thing I haven't told you. I saved it to last because I needed everything else to land first. Her name was Medusa. It comes from the ancient Greek word medain. It means to protect, to guard, to rule over. Her name means the protectress, the woman whose goddess didn't protect her, the woman whose temple didn't keep her safe, the woman who is exiled to the edge of the world with no one to guard her. Her name, the name the Greeks gave her before anything else, means the one who protects. And for 3,000 years, that's exactly what they used her for. They put her face on shields, on armor, on temples, on the doors of homes, on amulets around children's necks. They used the face of a woman who was never protected to protect themselves. They just never protected her back. If this changed the way you see Medusa, subscribe to the Midnight Archives, where we illuminate the dark corners of history, the stories that live beneath the ones we tell ourselves. Until next time, keep the candle lit.